stepping into being more of ourselves and wanting better for ourselves.
Mm.
You know? And
Yeah.
sometimes that means, well, I think that means either are you going to have, if something's come up where you're not happy with the way you're being treated or you're not happy in a situation, are you going to choose to have a conversation or are you going to walk away? Like, what are you going to do? Because I think probably a lot of us are at a point in our life where we're just tired of doing the same thing and playing the same game. So it's like, if you don't want to do that, if you're at a place in your life where you just don't want it to be the same, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So if you don't want to do that, and I think a lot of us get to that place now. So it's like, then you start asking yourself the question, well, am I going to face this head on? Am I going to attempt to create change and make this better? Or is it not worth my time? And am I just walking away?
Love that.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynne. I'm Dr. Brooke.
And I'm Dr. Lynne.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us. Before we jump into another awesome topic, I want to remind you all that the Life After Kids book, Rediscover Yourself and Thrive Beyond Motherhood, is available for pre-order currently at www.lifeafterkids.com/book. Make sure you head over there to not only pre-order the book, but also grab your book bonuses that are free right now, including a 74-page book companion guide that'll help you do all the things in this next chapter of life.
Yes, it'll help you step by step to implement and execute, right? So you can think all the things and want all the things, but you have to do some of that to bring it into your life. So love that. Thank you. If you're watching on YouTube today, I just have to say you're probably going to get a special treat because we were traveling. Dr. Brooke, you knew that, and got back on Friday, and 3 of our bags, which we checked 3 bags, and none of them made it home, and we still haven't gotten them. So all my makeup is in that car, and in the bag, and my hair stuff and all the things, and so you don't even know what that's like. But thank goodness it was on this end and not on the beginning of our trip. Just thinking about that. 3 of us not having anything, that would have been horrible.
2 things there. Number 1, how do you look so amazing without makeup or hair products? That's unfair. And number 2, those
Good
are the
line.
things as well that, well, maybe you're not as bad as me because you're pretty minimalistic, I think, with your products. But like, I would never, even if it was 3 or 4 days, I wouldn't be rushing out to buy all new products because it's
No,
not cheap.
I'm not doing it. No,
Yeah.
it's in those moments you kind of learn some humility and some, right? And it's okay. Like, we spend so much, we have so many things at our disposal in this country, and it's a little bit of a cleanse to go without. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable, but I will survive this. This too shall pass. There are far greater obstacles, to overcome than this.
Well, you look very relaxed and glowy, so you must have had a great trip.
It was wonderful. It was a great trip. Best food we've had in Europe yet. Highly, highly recommend Barcelona. So we'll maybe talk about that sometime. So
Yeah, we should do that. Other people might be thinking about
yes,
wanting to go there.
yeah.
That'd be fun.
And we're not talking about that today because
Nope.
we are talking about something that every woman in midlife faces, but few of us talk about openly. So hopefully this is a really constructive dialogue to help you not only give this some serious thought, but to actually start to implement this in your life. Because we're talking about having hard conversations, whether that's, setting boundaries with your grown kids, which I'm sure both of us have a story around that, and having a hard conversation with them, or speaking up in your marriage, or asking for what you need, even in friendships or at work. Those moments can be tough, but they surely are such important growth points for us and help us to move beyond and speak into what we need and what we, standing up for ourselves. I think in those times, that's a huge part of maturity and a huge part of thriving in this phase.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not going to do it now, when? By the time we're this age, right? I'm soon to be 50. You just recently hit that, and no time like the present to start to speak up for yourself. and have hard conversations. This is will be an interesting conversation because this is definitely self-admittedly something that I am not great at. Actually, I think I'm pretty good at it with people that are not close to me. I'm not good at
Interesting.
it with people that I'm very close with, which maybe sounds like silly because you'd think maybe it would be the other way around.
I
But
think
this
I'm
is not,
reversed.
yeah, no, not for me. And I think it's because it wasn't modeled for me growing up. We don't have hard conversations. We just push things under the rug. We blow up and then we act like move on like nothing happened. Um, and so it just that's something that eludes me, frankly. So it'll be interesting to hear your tips. I have a couple. I do this really well with my husband and my
Yeah, talk
kids.
about it. Yeah, talk about how you address it. Like when, let's just get into it. Like what, how's this come up for you, and how do you work through when you have to have those times where you you have to face something.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know why this is jumping out in my mind, but specifically when we moved from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts, this is going back like 14, 15 years. The kids were little. But we had somebody in our neighborhood that was really upset with me. And like, she didn't know me that well because we hadn't lived there that long, right? But she was upset about something that was completely misconstrued. And she didn't come to me with it, but she talked to other people. And so it got to me.
Worst.
And yeah, and that was not good, especially because it was like I definitely the story she had in her mind, and I'm not going to go into detail in case there happens to be someone listening that might make the connection. I don't mean to open up a can of worms from 15 years ago, but I was like, I could have just left that alone, and just let it be because I didn't really know her that well even at that point. But I was like, no, this is not okay because this is not how I operate in this. And I didn't even do anything. Like she needs to understand like where I was actually coming from. So I called her. And I think the first point that I would have is that if you're having a tricky conversation with somebody, my most valuable advice would be start the conversation by meeting them where they are or like speaking like kindness to them. Like, for example, I could understand why you thought this, and this because of this, and this. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't just go in and start telling them how wrong they are and why they did this. And I think this applies to your kids too. Like, you have to sort of, because otherwise, if you don't start a conversation that way, that's going to be a hard one. They're probably not going to be open minded. So I
Mm.
think that's the first thing is to start with some kindness and to sort of speak something that you see in them or just start off with like, well, I can imagine how you're feeling or imagine what you thought or whatever the case. And that's how I started with her. But then beyond that, I'm just a pretty straight shooter. So I was very like upfront. I hit it head on and I was like, listen, I've heard that you're thinking this, and this, and that's just not the case. And here's what really happened. I just needed to tell you that because I don't need you talking behind my back. I don't need this to be a big deal. If you have any issues or concerns or questions for me, I'm happy to answer anything you want to ask me. If you're upset, please tell me. Let's get this out in the open and get over it. And we had like a 15-minute conversation, and she talked through, and it was definitely just a misunderstanding. Um, and yeah, and then we got past it. Oh, we were never like super tight friends after that, but we did spend a decent amount of time together through our kids growing up, so we got past it enough to be really friendly and hang out together and have the kids together and things like that. So, but I think that had we not had that conversation, we probably wouldn't have got to that place because either she would be holding on to like irritation with me, maybe not, maybe she would have let it go. But for me, just the way I'm wired, I definitely would have been holding on to that. Like, do you know what I mean? I would have just put up a wall that was kind of like, I wouldn't have been able to get past that and just forget about it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few reasons why these types of conversations can feel even harder now that we're in midlife. And one of them, we'll just go through a few of the reasons.
yeah.
So, one of them is just, we've spent years prioritizing others, many of us, right? Our
Mm,
kids, our partners, parents. So sometimes, and this is unfortunate, really, but it can feel unnatural to express our own needs or to have that guilt around even feeling something that we feel, right? And I think that's really the most important thing is to acknowledge what feels like it's crossing a boundary.
mm,
And when that happens, at some point, either you address it or it reaches a maximum tension. So that's probably what you are feeling with that friend, right? you don't even have to be an empathetic or an empath, so to speak, have that strength to know and to be able to feel something that is like off in the tone.
Yeah.
And so when I speak about maximum tension, I just mean like that will not go away. And many of us have the tendency to like bury our head and avoid the conflict. I think there's a couple, I'm not really well versed in this, but there are certain types of conflict styles, right? There's people that like meet it head on and they're like, can't
Yeah.
wait to take on the next fight. And they're like, and stand up for each other. And then there's people that will go, just retreat, retreat, retreat. And then there's people that bury their head and pretend it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure there's combinations of all of that in between. So I think having some awareness of how you approach though, any sort of conflict, I guess, because hard conversations often come loaded with that. Um, and accept it. I think you don't necessarily need to change it. I think you just need to be aware and making sure that you're not, um, again, with your conflict style, like betraying yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not going like beyond that boundary. And you can be betraying yourself by fighting too much because you're resisting then. Um, all right, we got deep there. But the second reason could be just, you don't want to rock the boat. You want to be the good girl. Like good girls don't fight. Like we want to be
Hmm.
agreeable. Like nobody likes conflict. It's not fun. I know I will sit in that place for a while because of that, right? You're just like, okay, we'll just go along, go with the flow. And then what do you think happens with that though when we sit there?
If you sit there and just go with the flow.
Yeah,
I think it depends a lot on your wiring, but I think in many cases, eventually you're going to blow your stack.
resentment will blow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not really resenting the other person, are you? In that moment, you're actually really resentful and mad at yourself because you're accepting something that you're swallowing something that you don't really care for, right?
Yeah.
It's violating boundary. And then another reason we just we're more sensitive, some of us during this life transition, right?
Mm.
Everything's emotional. I think the stakes are a little bit higher. We're getting older. Everything just feels at times a little bit more emotionally loaded. And whether that's hormones playing a role or just life changes occurring, I think that can be another common um, difficulty for having these types of conversations. Anything you would add?
Um, I think it's just stepping into being um, more of ourselves and wanting better for ourselves,
Mm,
you know? And
yeah.
sometimes that means, well, I think that means either are you going to have, if something's come up where you're not happy with the way you're being treated or you're not happy in a situation, are you going to choose to have a conversation or are you going to walk away? Like, what are you going to do? Because I think probably a lot of us are at a point in our life where we're just tired of doing the same thing and playing the same game. So it's like if you don't want to do that, if you're at a place in your life where you just don't want it to be the same, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So if you don't want to do that, and I think a lot of us get to that place now. So it's like then you start asking yourself the question, well, am I going to face this head on? Am I going to attempt to create change and make this better? Or is it not worth my time? And am I just walking away?
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So back to your example, you gave a great example. I have this often, well, with family and friends, it's come up for sure. I think more often, more commonly for me, I encounter it within my work environment where I manage people and you just kind of know something's off and you sort of have to address it. And, you know, there's a couple of approaches and I'm sure for those of you that work outside the home, I'm sure you've been in those situations where obviously you have to keep it very professional, but you know that there's something wrong. And so how I've approached it, and I actually take that approach into my personal life too. So I'll share it with you. As far as how do you do this? How do you even
Mm.
start this? Is I'll just observe something. And if I observe the behavior, I'll start with that. And I'll just say, hey, I've just noticed this and I just want to find out like what's up with that. And that's usually an opening at least for a conversation, because if you start the conversation with, and you're sitting down with somebody, you're like, well, how is everything? And you're expecting them to come out with it and get into it all. It's probably not going to happen. Most
Mm-hmm.
people are going to dance around it because we're not really sure we're going there.
Yeah.
So that
And they might
observation,
not even know there's, sorry to interject, but they might not even know there is an issue. Some people are just frankly not self aware. So
yeah,
if you try to start it with an open ended question, you might not get very far.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes it's a miscommunication, like in your situation. So again, like you said, they could be caught off guard. So it's a great non-emotional, non-aggressive, non-threatening way to start the conversation, to get into it. And I think you could do this with your kids, right? So it's summer. We've got a lot of college kids at home. We've got people with their kids at home, and it's like the kids are checking into a hotel and getting room service and housekeeping every day. And that can be something that you want to confront, right? Or just even, there's all sorts of reasons with your kids that can come up. But just observing that, hey, I noticed that you're like pretty happy around here, and I'm not seeing you pick up your towels. It feels like I'm having to do that for you. However you say it, just say it without that defensiveness, and just open up the conversation to talk. Because as soon as you trigger those defenses, what do you? And this is why these conversations are hard, because it's like you're in a little bit of a landmine, and you're kind of trying to avoid that a little bit. Sometimes it's inevitable, but if you get somebody who's defensive, then all that starts to happen is two people are what? They're defending each other
Yeah.
themselves, and
Yeah.
you're not working on a win-win at all. You're not really getting to a solution. You're just, no, that's not me. This is
Yeah.
why this, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's why I started the conversation with saying, like, sometimes you have to start out very kind and meet the person where they are. Because if you go on the defensive right away, to your point, they're going to be on the defensive too, and you're likely not getting anywhere. And what good is that? And there's always two sides. I think this is something that we miss too as humans. It's only natural. Like, there are two people in any conflict, and there's two sides to that conflict, and there are two different stories there. So to validate the other person, especially if it's someone you care about to some extent, and like say, hey, I see you, and I see why you're feeling that way, but also here's how, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, because listening is important. And I think, what do we always say? You will get back what you give. And most of us enter into those conversations really with a lot to say,
Yep.
but we're not really preparing ourselves to listen. And if we would sit back, I love what you just said. There's two people in a conversation, and I think there's a couple schools of thought, and there's people who will tend to put the blame outside of themselves. And then there's those of us that feel like within any situation, it's a 50-50. Even in bad situations, you co-created something. You found yourself in that situation. You played into it somehow, right? It's not one-sided ever. And in what we're speaking on, in the grounds we're speaking on.
I mean, there are definitely cases. I've had that in my own life with family, really, that there is really no other side. you know but you can also take a step back and say, even though they're not right, I can see why they're thinking that or feeling that way.
Yeah, or if you're really being hurt by somebody who is hurt themselves,
Right.
wounded or
You can
not.
give a little more grace.
Yeah, it's one of those where that's a non-win, and you just have to, like you said, you just have to see where they're coming from and understand that they're sort of wounded, and they're not ready to show up to heal the situation. They're having to heal themselves or something.
Right.
So I've been reading I've been reading Louise Hay. I read it years ago. You Can Heal Your
Mm-hmm.
Life. And so if some of this is sounding very like a little bit like that, it's where it's coming from. It's on my mind. But that's a great book for anybody who has been stuck in something. I mean, there's I don't agree with 100% of it, obviously, but there's some really great exercises in there for getting through to um, to the side that you create and helping attract those better conversations. So, all right. What else would you add as far as, so we talked about that entrance. I think that's the hardest part, just starting those conversations, right? Um, and oftentimes when you do and you're willing to show up and listen, you're going to get that other person explaining their side, and then you can kind of see their side. And sometimes it's just a set of bad circumstances,
Yeah.
and you just have to accept it together and move on, right? But I think another, before going into it, so that would be step one. We always talk about step zero. What's the prep for that? Is before going into those conversations, whether it's with your child or your spouse, figure out what it exactly is that you're looking for to come out of that conversation. Like, what is the outcome that you actually want? Because if you don't start there, what'll happen is you'll take all these zigzags, and if somebody gets you off track, then you're going to end up like with your head spun around, and who knows, there could be emotions flailing, and there's no direction towards actually what are we looking to get out of this conversation.
Well, that's a really good point. That was something I was going to bring up as we talked, because the other point to that is, um, depending on what you want to get out of that conversation. If you don't, it's like we talk about in so many things. You start with the end in mind, because depending on what you want to get out of the conversation, you're going to handle yourself and speak differently,
Mm, yeah,
right? You're
exactly.
not, it depends on the outcome. And there are instances, and this has happened to me even in the last 6 months, where I've gone through and there's three questions. And I can't remember the third. One of them is, maybe you'll know, Lynn. One of them is, do you want to be right?
Mm,
Um, do you want a resolution? And then there's one more. And
but I love it.
yeah, I'm going to look it up as we talk, because it's
Right.
really good. But I've asked myself, and I've gone through those questions just in the last 6 months, because I've had, it's a long story, but I've gotten to the place too where I'm like, you know what? The conversation isn't worth having, because the result that I want of these three things that I'm asking myself, I know with this particular person, no matter how I handle it, I'm not going to get there. So what's, it's not worth my stress. It's not worth my energy.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. I just need to figure out a way to let that go and move on.
Hmm. It's exactly, it's acceptance of just what it is. Yeah.
Yep.
I also think picking the right time and environment is important. So, again, with your why,
Oh, that's good.
yeah, like if you really want a solution, then you don't pick into this when you're driving on the highway and it's like stressful traffic, right? Like that's not the best time. Um, there's no perfect time, that being said, so don't wait too long. But certainly think about some peace and calm and some neutral spaces, perhaps, where you guys can take your kid to a coffee shop, leave the home, take them out to lunch. Sit down somewhere outside of your own four walls so that when you come home, you can leave that conversation there and it doesn't affect the peace that you have in the home.
That's so good. And also, I mean, this should be pretty obvious, but don't have those conversations when you're upset or angry.
Yes.
If you
Or
can at all, avoid it. Sometimes it comes up because it's just on the fly.
yeah.
But, the time to probably have that conversation is not when you're all worked up. The time to definitely not have that conversation if you're still cycling is when you're like on your period. I mean, these are real things. Like um, you can do yourself more damage, especially if your goal is conflict resolution and you want to, get to a better place with the person. You probably should give yourself some grace and make sure you're in a good space yourself.
Yes. Wait till day 12 of your
Yeah.
period, like right
Yeah.
you ovulate. Also, another tip here is silence is okay. So I've just got this note jotted here. Some again, it kind of lends itself to the whole listening piece. Like I think sometimes we jump into and we're more worried about another person's feelings in that moment when in a hard conversation, we have to be concerned for the other person, but we also need to work towards that resolution. And sometimes that outcome means things are, you're going to be in a moment where you're not meeting up. And I think good things can happen in silence, and just, especially with your child, not placing words in their mouth, not leading with blame. Obviously, well, I or you always, or I feel, I'm not a therapist, but I have learned and picked that up over, on TV over the years, that those are not helpful statements to work towards a mutual resolution, right? Because the truth is, nobody always does anything. So when you say that, it's like throwing fuel on the fire.
Sure.
You can say how you feel. You can say, when you do this, this affects me in this way, because that's a truth.
Sure.
But saying, well, you always do it this way, da 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 da, is that true? No, that can't be true. So let's watch our words. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's the same thing. I think it all comes back to when what you're saying there is like you don't want to put the other person on the defensive if you can at all avoid that. So yeah, just be careful. And that's hard. And that's why I say, like, if you're in a bad space emotionally, maybe don't have that conversation, because when emotions are flying high, it's much harder to keep a level head and not go there. Especially if the person on the other end of the conversation is going back at you and you don't appreciate what they're saying to you. It's really hard to keep your cool and not, you know what I mean? It's very easy for a conflicting conversation to escalate quickly.
And that's why you have your why written down in front of you going into
Yeah.
that conversation, because you're so right. Unless you have that laser focus on, okay, this is the outcome that we're heading towards, and you're going to need that other person to work with you on that. So if it's all just, again, those defenses, if you step on that landmine and it goes off, and again, sometimes the person is just not there, and they're actually looking for the landmines. Sometimes that happens. People need that release, and they get it in a variety of different ways. That just means, you know, you can't control how they react, but you can control how you keep emotionally tight in that conversation and focus on the outcome, right?
Well, and by the way, just let me interject. That's why I say, like, know the person that you're getting involved in this conversation with, because if they don't have a high emotional IQ, it might not be worth your time or your effort. And it might end up that you're going to feel worse afterwards. I've had that happen to me many times.
Yeah.
So I think, as much as we think it might um feel good to, like, say our piece, sometimes depending on who that person is, it really is better to just step back and manage letting go of this situation on your own without feeling like you have to have the last word or be heard. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think there's a good deal of maturity in that. I think that that's my, I think it depends on the level of how much you care about the outcome being resolved. And sometimes it just can't be. And I think it's in those situations that it's fine to just let it go. I think if you want to work for its betterment, so we're talking about with your kids and your spouse, I
Yeah,
think it's really important to not just accept it, because then I think,
that's a different
um,
story.
yeah, that's a different story.
That
Yeah.
can get you really into some trouble, I think, if you
Yeah.
don't adjust them.
Yep, and that point leads me to this. It's allow for some discomfort. So that's part of the how to. And honestly, I will tell
Mm.
you, over the years and having to address these certain matters with so many people, whether it's at work where I do it pretty regularly, or at home, it definitely gets easier, but it is still hard.
Mm.
And to your point, not every one of those hard conversations ends with a hug and a resolution. So I think
Yeah.
it's something I've had to work to accept, because you know, in a perfect world, you can always find a solution or a path forward. And I think with maturity and age, I've just kind of come to see that it doesn't mean there's right or wrong. It just means there's just different paths being
Right.
taken, and that's okay. So my point is, it's okay if it's messy. some, you know, it's still worth it. It's still worth it to have that conversation, whether that's for your own self worth in speaking up, um, or in just saying, I did everything I could.
Yeah. Yeah. If you absolutely, I think, especially if it comes to your kids and you need to have a hard conversation or there's something going on there, if you get on the other side of that and there is no conflict resolution, at least you can have peace of mind. Like the worst thing I think would be to look back and think, man, what if I had handled that differently?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did I do everything I actually could in this relationship?
Yeah.
And so, at that point, I guess it's definitely worth putting your own emotions at risk and maybe not getting the resolution that you were hoping for, at least to know that you tried.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where it is so worth it to have that hard conversation, because then on the other side of it,
Sure.
say, yeah. So we talked about some opening, you just, with your friend that you gave that example, you sort of said, hey, I think we really just need to talk about this. It was just a more direct, like, let's just jump into it. My method was observation and just speaking an observation, something that I've seen. It's definitely more indirect. I love these strong examples that are still soft. So these are some opening phrases that can help. So I'm just going to read them.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
That will be hugely
So
helpful, I think.
I think so. And, you know, hopefully you're somewhere where you can jot these down or transcribe them, however you
They'll
do it.
probably be in the show notes.
Or in the show notes, even better.
And even the newsletter. If you haven't signed up, go to the website to do that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So I like this one starting off. This is a little hard for me to bring up, but it matters enough that I need to do it. So it's just an opening phrase that lets that person know, all right, we're going in. We're going to open some things up here.
That's great.
Yeah. This one's also great because it starts with the premise that there's a lot of love there. So I love you, and because I care so much, I need to tell you this, or I need to say this. So I think that's something that would probably come pretty easy for us when we're discussing something with our kids. If we're seeing something concerning, um, just revalidating that it comes from a place of love.
I've had that happen to me and that really backfired.
Really?
Yes, very badly. But like from on the receiving end of it. Um,
Like someone
However,
said that to you, or no?
yes,
Oh,
yes, started the
like so.
conversation
Okay, but it
with
felt like
like, I love you, and that's
I
why we
was
need to have
angry.
this conversation, and then ended up being like on a high horse or pointing her finger. And so that it was almost like a starting with a like, no, like don't ever start a conversation with no offense, but because there's an offense coming.
Yeah,
And in that scenario, for me, it would have been better if the person had just been very direct and said, listen, this is like, we got to talk about this. However, to your point, I do think if you're talking with a child, that's a very good way to start a conversation.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, just
Next,
throwing it out there.
next one. I'm working on honoring my own needs more, and this is part of that. So I think
Mm,
that's just laying some tile work down to, this would be great for a spouse or somebody who's close to you that is maybe you're learning your boundaries, and you can't just pull the rug out underneath people. You have to kind of give them some, if you want them to come along with you, you have to kind of give them some
I
um,
agree.
upfront notice, that you've changed. And I think too often we change and we just expect people to sense it and know and read our minds. And honestly, I think just saying simple phrases like that can just let them know, hey, I'm doing some self work. I'm working on me. And I need to say this, because this is part of that. And just, there's so much power in just disclosing what you're thinking accurately, instead of, I have a feeling this is what's wrong, and just blurting it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good.
Yep. And then I this one's great as well. Just, I don't have all the answers, but I know I need to speak this out loud. And that's really coming in with some humility, some being humble and saying, I don't, I'm not pretending to know how to solve this, but I do know we need to talk about it.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the how to. Other than that, I mean, you sort of kind of got to jump into it. And again, all the tips that we gave, just keep your emotions tidy as much as possible. Breathe. Silence is okay, and just know the outcome, right? And I think, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just think that even all of that and, us putting it in a little pretty package, there's just going to be a lot of times still where people are going to be, oh, we'll get to that later. We'll talk about that later, or there's time for that, or I'm just going to watch that. I see it happening, but I'm going to let it get worse first and blow up possibly.
Mm,
But I would just challenge you to think about the last time you avoided a hard conversation, and if you'd done it sooner, or at all. And the fact that maybe you didn't have that conversation, what did that cost? How did that affect you? And I think that's just a good reflection, or journal question for you to think about so that you can ad- address things a little sooner, tidy up your space, right? Mentally.
yes. Yeah, I think that's good. I had to just ironically because I just found out about this topic and this was one of your topics just I think yesterday. But over the weekend I had to have a hard conversation with one of my kids. It wasn't a face-to-face talk conversation, but it was via text, which is not ideal, but it just was what the situation was. It was on the fly. And I did not I did not know how that I didn't know. So my son, we all have been sick. Like I don't know what got a hold of us, but it's been like going on 3 weeks. And in the weirdly, like my husband and I got over it and the kids were still coughing and then it started for us again, which doesn't typically happen with a virus. Like once you're over it, you're over it. So I don't know, but I mean, my one son who I'm speaking about really took it the worst. And was maybe, I don't know, heading to walking pneumonia. I'm not sure, but he was really not good. And we were in New Hampshire and he left and he said he was leaving in the morning. He was going to golf with his friends. Fine. He texts me around 8 o'clock and says, I'm staying the night at so and so's house. And I know what was going on and why he was staying the night there because he wasn't able to drive home, right? Like I'm not
Yeah.
stupid. And I was like, yeah, no, you're not. You're coming home, which I don't typically like, he's almost 20. I mean, yes, he's under my roof. He still has to listen and he's like coming, it was a weird I've never had that conflict. And maybe this is a little off topic, but I think it's a good conversation to have because that doesn't my kids are like they don't typically push me on stuff, so I didn't, it was an odd, and I kind of let my kids
Come to
figure things
those
out the hard
conclusions.
way and make their own decisions. But in this scenario I was like, no, like he's being stupid
Yeah.
and he can't make this decision for himself because I thought I was going to be maybe taking him to like urgent care, which if you know me, like I don't do that. That's like a last resort, because his breathing was so bad. So I was like, no, you're coming home. And I don't pull the mom card like very, very, very seldom with you. And I'm pulling the mom card. In this moment, I know what's best for you. You have been run down. If you stay the night there, you're on the path to being like, I don't know what, but you need, and it was a really hard conversation. And I wasn't convinced even when I went to bed, like I wasn't convinced that he was coming home because he was very like, and I went to bed that night, like, okay, what, like, I can't go and get him. Right. I mean, I guess I could have, but I wasn't going to go and get him. And, I was like, I got to put this in God's hands. I got to go to bed. He knows, like I told him, I laid it out. I was like, either you were um faking how sick you were or you were being overly dramatic, one of the two. And if neither of those are options, then you were sick enough that you have no business sleeping somewhere tonight. Like you're crazy. You're being stupid. Kids are just, they don't have enough. You talked about this on one of our, they don't have enough reasoning yet.
Prefrontal cortex doesn't fully form until they're 25. So
They
their
just do.
critical thinking is not always
Yeah.
right there. And they sometimes still need us to remind them of
Yeah.
when they're being stupid.
Yeah. So anyway, right before I went to bed and I texted him and said, when are you coming home? And I didn't get a response. And so I was like, okay, we'll see. He did end up texting me back, but it was like, well, after I went to bed, it said probably like midnight. So he did come home. But when I went to bed, I was like, okay, I like, this is out of my hands right now. he's either going to make the right decision and come home or he's not. And then how am I handling it if he doesn't come home? And I
Right.
was like,
That would
with
be
this,
another hard conversation.
oh, and there's another hard conversation. And definitely, like, at that point, it was going to be like, no more truck. You're not going anywhere. You're done for the summer. Because you can't, like, I've never
Yep.
done that with my kids. And I think that's why he, at the end of the day, came home, because there was always a consequence, and it had to be a heavy consequence. There was going to be a heavy consequence. Like, there was no way he was going to get it. That's why I have not had that with an adult kid yet. Right, where
Mm.
I've had to, like, I've told them what to do and they blatantly don't
Yeah.
listen and just do their own thing. And it was a little dicey. I was a little sweaty because I was like, oh my gosh, this is like totally uncharted territory for me.
Yeah,
Um,
because if they don't comply in that instance, then you have to really dish out the hard consequence, and you have to be willing to back that up. Like, you can't,
yes.
right? And that's the space you knew you were in. Huh.
Yeah, I didn't know how that, and there could have led to a hard conversation of, like, I had it all played out in my mind. Like, I'm an adult, I can make the decisions for myself. Maybe you're an adult, but while you're living under my roof, you also need to listen to me. Now, I don't play that card all the time, so when it's like very serious, that's an easier card to play, right? But it was just a very hard, it was a very strange, and it was odd. It was a hard conversation to have.
Hmm.
Um, and he did come home, so thank goodness.
Good job, Andrew. Um,
um,
No,
anyway,
that's great. That's perfect. Great illustration of when to have those tough times. And you knew that you had to speak up in that instance, even though you could have not. You could have thought, well, I don't want to rock the boat. He's only home for, so many months, so many weeks, really. And I just want him to be happy, and I just
yeah.
want him to get along. I just want to get along with them. And the truth is that having those hard conversations can actually, whether you should start with that or not, but they really are the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself,
Yeah.
because they don't have to be harsh. Hard conversations, we don't mean that. We don't mean coming at someone with guns a blazing. Like, that's not going to get your outcome, right? Um, Likely, like I said, you're going to need that kid to you're not going to want to push him away. You're going to want to work with him so he makes better decisions for the future. So they definitely don't need to be harsh, but they can be a very loving and a very brave way to honor your child, and most importantly, honor yourself, I think.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, it's a good thing to say, because I do think a lot of us are like, we want so badly to have good relationships with them. We want so badly for them to be happy. We want so badly for them to be our friend, at this stage of life, and we only have them home for a short period of time when they're home. So we want it to be happy. We don't want it to be. So I think what you can take from that conversation we just had is that if it has to do with their safety, if you see them going down a path that is not safe or not good for them or whatever it is, you always have to go with being the parent and
Yeah,
having the hard conversation.
pull whatever card you can. And fortunately, when they are in your home like that, and they're in college, or they're not paying for the cars or their phones, then you still have some control there, right? Some leeway.
Yeah, but that was a scary thing for me too, because I was thinking when I went to bed, like, in a couple of years, he can make this decision and I can't do anything about it.
Oh,
Like,
I thought
how
you were going to say
stupid
I
are
was
you?
going to take the truck and I was going to be driving him around all summer.
Oh
I was
no, I wouldn't have done
doing it.
that. No, 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 no. Anyway,
Well, hopefully this conversation helped. Hopefully it reached somebody out there on the cusp of a hard conversation and gives you a little bit of courage to take that head on. And if it did help you, please share it with a friend who might need some of that courage too.
yeah, that's great. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube if you prefer to watch and you want to see Dr. Lynn's glowing natural face without her makeup on.
It's a sight to see. I don't know if it's a good one, but
It's a good one. www.lifeafterkids.com, where you can find all the free resources that we have. If you do lifeafterkids.com/book, you'll get to the book pre-order page. I hope you have a great day and an even better week.
All right. Until next time.